Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains. Their ancestral lands were taken from them without their consent, treaty or compensation. I pay respect to elders past and present. I respect their spiritual beliefs and connections to land, which are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people of today. Thank you everyone for being here today. It's such a joy to be with you, to share this stage with some very eloquent individuals. I hope to be at least meeting the high mark that they've set thus far. To be able to hear from people with lived experience of being on NewStart as well is so important. I mean, I'm going to share a little bit about those stories that were given to us on council here with you today, but to hear directly from Aidan and Marie has been fantastic. So thank you very much for that.
Yay!
Yeah, let's give a round of applause. That was fantastic. Yeah, thank you. Yes, the City of Port Adelaide Enfield is proud to have stood up and backed this campaign to raise the rate of NewStart. I'm delighted that my council was the first to add its voice to this growing chorus of community and business who are supporting this campaign. In making this decision back in August 2017, we did become the first council in Australia to publicly advocate for NewStart to be increased. But why did we do it? Why did we do it? What made a little council, well, not so little, but what made a council in little old Adelaide decide to inject itself into a national debate when at the time no one else in local government was willing to get some skin in the game? Well, it started with an email from a guy in my community called Brendan. Brendan shared his story with me and with the rest of the council, explaining how he'd been in and out of employment and for some time had really struggled to carve out his career. Brendan shared these words: "It is simply too low to live on. For the individual, the low rate of NewStart creates a serious hindrance to finding work and remaining ready for work, while the economy as a whole, it's a needless brake on consumer demand." He then went on to say this about the growing campaign: "Local governments such as the City of Port Adelaide Enfield should add to these voices, bringing the influence of their important place in our democracy and economy to bear on this issue." He says, "We have fallen behind the rest of the world. We have fallen behind our own standards as a society. We have fallen victim to the delusion that unemployment payments need to be punitively low in order to motivate people into work, and people are hurting because of it." Brendan says, "As unemployed workers, our health, our dignity, our ability to be and remain part of a community, our ability to find employment, all of these things are slowly eroded by the drastic inadequacy of NewStart, making unemployment a much greater blight on an affected area and increasing the risks of homelessness and crime." Now that was just the first email that we got. There was a second, there was a third, and by gosh, there was a fourth. One came in from Jan, then another came in from Catherine. I want to show you a bit about what Catherine had to say. "My rent costs me $230 per week. I get $40 per week rent relief, leaving only $77 for food, bills and other living costs. Obviously, I cannot cover my basic living costs with only $77 and resort to using credit cards to get by." Yeah, boo. "It's a vicious cycle," she says. "When I do get employment, I try to pay off the credit cards. However, as you're well aware, the interest rates, the ever-increasing power and gas costs, insurance, car registration, phone, Wi-Fi costs, along with the sporadic nature of work opportunities, I find this impossible. I rarely buy new clothes or even second-hand clothes. I avoid using my gas heater in winter." Now this part broke my heart. "I've skipped meals. I utilise my credit card to pay medical bills and dental costs. Occasionally I lash out and join my friends for a meal out using my credit card, knowing that it will only add to my increasing debt. However, I figure this is important for my mental health, networking, social health, and ultimately my ability to be in a good mind and spirit for job seeking." I actually ended up losing count of the number of people who wrote to me about this issue, sharing their personal experience of being trapped by this viciously low rate of NewStart. And I'd actually right now like to acknowledge the very hard work that Paz and all of the other team at the Osbourne Network did. Without their advocacy, without their encouragement for these stories to be shared with us, we may not have reached the decision that we did. But they worked their asses off and it was great. But I do want to share words from one other resident. And this really broke my heart. Much of the following, she wrote, I have not admitted to anyone before due to its embarrassing nature. I hope that you will hear my story with an open heart and not judge me too harshly. These, unfortunately, are the realities that the poor are subjected to on a daily basis. I wrote back and I said, look, I don't judge you at all. I judge the people who've failed for 24 years to do something about this. People do it tough in my community, they really do. In March 2017, Port Adelaide Enfield had an unemployment rate of 8.9%. That was compared to 6.7% for the rest of South Australia and 5.9% for Australia as a whole. The proportion of NewStart recipients in our city has increased significantly in recent years, growing by, get this, 42.5%, almost doubling between 2011 and 2016. And can we hear a shame?
Shame!
Thank you. Some people may question the role of local government in supporting this campaign, but for me it's obvious. Our city plan's got 5 themes, including leadership, well-being, community. We want to be a city of opportunity, not just for Brendan, Jan, Catherine, and everyone else who got in touch with us during that campaign, but for every single resident, irrespective of their personal circumstances. And that's why we advocate for our residents who are doing it tough. That's why we do things like loan Wi-Fi dongles from our libraries, so people seeking employment who can't afford to connect to the internet at home can jump online and search for a job that way. After Port Adelaide Enfield became the first council in Australia to get behind this campaign, others have followed. In June, just now, delegates from across Australia supported a motion at our national conference for the federal government to immediately increase the rate of NewStart, youth allowance and related payments as a matter of urgency. That's what started last August in Port Adelaide Enfield. It is glaringly obvious that the low rate of NewStart presents a barrier to employment and risks entrenching poverty and homelessness. You would have a hard time to argue that it doesn't significantly impact our community, our economy, and the health and well-being of our residents. NewStart is designed to provide financial support for people who are unemployed and trying to get back into the workforce. But how are they supposed to do that when they're struggling on a wage that is more than $160 per week below the poverty line? And let's be clear. We're talking about the poverty line. We're not talking about the gap between where people currently are and where they're living comfortably, where they're living well off. We're talking about the gap where they are to poverty. They're struggling in a way that no other Australian should have to struggle. When you're incapable of paying your utility bills, as we heard, when you're worrying about how to feed yourself or your family each night, scraping by to pay the rent to keep a roof over your head, simply getting by takes priority. Getting a job becomes more and more difficult. Families struggle, children struggle, and this is where intergenerational consequences for families begin. We know the job market's tough. We know that there are more than 10 job seekers for every job vacancy. And in the current environment, retaining the current level of NewStart makes 0 sense.
No.
Zero.
No.
Increasing NewStart would improve the quality of life for unemployed people by removing some of the financial barriers and allowing more space for them to upskill themselves and engage in the labour market. Now, speaking for my council, I believe that it's critical we advocate to support people living in our city, helping them to succeed. We need to create opportunities, we need to ensure that intergenerational poverty is not entrenched, that our residents enjoy a dignified life. We also need to provide opportunities for our local economy. Increasing NewStart would not only take a load off of families and individuals, but provide a boost to local businesses, helping them grow and prosper and employ more people as extra funds circulate locally. On this point, the Business Council of Australia have advocated to government that the low rate of NewStart presents a barrier to employment and risks entrenching poverty. It's time. It's time for more people, more organisations, more local governments, more businesses, and more politicians to stand up and put their voice behind raising NewStart. We have a responsibility to uphold the dignity of every person in our community, especially those living in the margins, those living in poverty. Now, I'm a proud member of the Labor Party, and as we've heard today, delegates from across the country will be meeting this December at the 45th National Conference right here in Adelaide. They'll be debating the contents of our national platform. So I dragged out a draft version. Yeah, we will do a flash mob on that one. I dragged out a draft version of the national platform this morning, and this is what I had to say about the NewStart allowance. Now, this is the draft form. This is under equitable social policy. Creating the opportunities and resources every Australian needs to participate in the economy and community life. So far, so good. This includes providing an adequate social safety net. It requires adequate support for those who are unemployed, people with disability and carers, people on low incomes, and people marginally attached to the labour market through local skills development, training and employment. And here's the kicker. Labor knows that people on NewStart are doing it tough. Labor will help to strengthen their capability, resilience and independence. This doesn't go far enough. It doesn't nearly go far enough. People living in poverty don't need their resilience strengthened. They need not to be living in poverty. Labor must commit to a policy of increasing the rate of NewStart in the first term of the government, should they win the next election. I also urge our current government to reconsider their attitude to NewStart and stop talking about it in terms of it being a hammock. Shame. No other single act would start to lift more than 763,000 Australians out of poverty and restore their dignity. I acknowledge that this will cost a lot of money to our budget, but Australia should not be a nation that balances its books on the backs of its poorest people. It is time to raise the rate. Thank you all.
Part about being short is like always going under the arm. We have our campaign slogan in Flora is community counts. And I was just thinking, back in 1997 when I started, it was because we live in a community, not an economy. And it's never been truer. The community is the one that has to be responsible for making sure these changes start, and they need to start now. So we've got some ideas jotted down here for later, so you won't be leaving without homework. Now I've got on my list Gail Kilby, is she here? Yep. Gail, come on down! Let's give Gail a welcome. She's from the Osbourne City Council, who are also signatories to the NewStart business. So good on them. Welcome, Gail.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. And I'd like to start by acknowledging that we meet on the land of the Kaurna people and we respect their connection with country, past, present and future. I'd like to extend that respect to everybody in this room. I'd like to say what a wonderful start we had with that choir. And did everybody else get goose pimples when the back of my neck, the hairs went up, so that was really amazing. So I'm here to speak on behalf of Onkaparinga. I will give the apologies of the Mayor who couldn't make it today because she had another appointment, but I'm a very enthusiastic Anti-Poverty Network supporter. I've been to a few of the events. We've been to a round table. I recognise a few faces from that round table, the recent one. So we, around about September last year, I think it was, I think we received emails in July last year particularly from a resident, Elena, is she here? No. We also had a deputation to council. I think Paz was there, and I think someone else here was there. Yes, so that's right. So I think it was pretty much unanimous in our council to support that. We wrote a letter to the federal ministers. We followed it up with another letter after another motion of council to reinforce our lobbying for raising the NewStart allowance. I went to the Local Government Association annual general meeting, the one here in Adelaide, so it was for the state, not for national. And was it Port Adelaide Enfield that moved the motion to... It's gone. To move a motion to support NewStart across all councils across the state. And unfortunately that didn't get up. And I did get up. I felt so strongly that I got up and stood up and debated. But unfortunately, I obviously didn't do well enough. And I think most of the argument there was that it's not the business of council. Well, that is absolutely ridiculous. ridiculous. Of course it's the business of council. In our council, when we hold a meeting, we stand up and we make a pledge to look after our residents. That's all our residents. That's not just our ratepayers, that is all our residents. And I think there's this belief somewhere in council and somewhere around the community that councils are only there for the ratepayers. That's not true. I'm a ratepayer. I am there to support everybody in the community, as is every ratepayer. And the reason we pay our rates is for services that help and assist people that need it. Our libraries, we have internet, we have computers where people can go and apply for jobs. We give money to social groups, we give money to community centres, we help in that way as well. So it definitely and absolutely is a business of council. And grassroots politicians, they're the people that live next door to you, around the corner. They're the people you can actually go up to and speak to about these things. So it is really our business. We also can get the ear of other politicians. We've got a few lovely politicians here in the room.